Well, as the war in Gaza enters its ninth month, there's growing frustration over the failure of Israeli and Palestinian political leaders to make any meaningful progress towards peace. And in this void, civil society organizations continue to do crucial work to sustain Arab-Jewish and Israeli-Palestinian cooperation and solidarity. Joining me now is John Linden. He's the executive director of the Alliance of Middle East Peace, which is a network of hundreds of Palestinian and Israeli peace-building organizations that are dedicated to coexistence. Welcome to DW, John. I'd like to begin by asking, where does a path to coexistence even begin when we're seeing such a devastating number of casualties, so much destruction, so much trauma, so much pain on both sides?
Well, thank you. I mean, the first step that is sort of non-negotiable and fairly obvious is that this devastating war needs to be brought to an end. The hostages need to be brought home to their families. And then I think the steps towards something better and hopefully transformative can begin, and civil society can play a critical role. But we should be really clear-eyed about just how traumatized both Israelis and Palestinians are. This is the most horrific period in the history of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And so when the guns do fall silent, we're going to be dealing with two populations who will have significant trauma, are already living through it right now, but hopefully a critical mass, and we're already beginning to see, I think, some evidence of this, will realize that there is no military solution to their problems, that the only path where both peoples can arrive at security, peace, equality, self-determination is via diplomacy, and that civil society can play a really critical and sort of insurmountable role to be able to deliver that.
And yet we are seeing in opinion polls that support for Hamas on the Palestinian side is still strong, while among Israelis there is growing opposition to even the prospect of a Palestinian state. So we're seeing both sides withdrawing from each other, which doesn't really suggest the possibility of any political progress. So how can trust be rebuilt?
Trust will take time, but also we know that restoring a diplomatic horizon and scaling the sort of programs that civil society do can accelerate that process. I'd also caution people not to overinterpret polling during a war, particularly a war as devastating as this. We've seen in previous rounds of violence that there's a rally around the flag effect during the war. And then afterwards, when the guns fall silent, there is more of a reckoning on what your own political leaders, whether you're Israeli or Palestinian, did or did not do to prevent a crisis such as this emerging. So I think there will be a lot of new dynamics emerging on the other side of this war. And also just to really underline the fact that we've been operating without any real possibility of diplomacy for 10 years now. It's 10 years since there's been any negotiations between both governments. So that being restored, when young Israelis and Palestinians can look at a process that they can believe in and then understand that they, as citizens, have a role in opening up the space to make it more viable. That is something we've never tried in Israel and Palestine. And we know from other conflicts, it can play a really vital role in opening up new pathways, creating that trust that is necessary, but also creating the ideas, the leaders, the engagement that can drive a diplomatic process to success.
Well, can you maybe give us some concrete examples of some of the work that your member organizations are doing, and tell us how the international community and specifically Germany could support their work?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is that our members, over a quarter of them, have stepped up and accelerated their work since October 7th, and only 6% have stopped or significantly slowed it. So this is a very resilient, determined and active peace-building field. A couple of quick examples. This weekend, one of our members, the Arava Institute, held a big workshop and event on how to rehabilitate Gaza, Israelis and Palestinians working together. Two other of our members, the Parent Circle and Competence for Peace, held a joint memorial event with tens of thousands of people joining either live or online to grieve together. Another member, Standing Together, have been protecting aid convoys getting into Gaza. So this is a really resilient field, and the way the international community can support them is very clear. Please put this work at the center of your diplomatic strategy. It's been at the margins or absent altogether in every previous round, and we have an opportunity to see that realized this coming week at the G7 summit, where for the first time we have 350 NGOs from around the world, over 160 from Israel and Palestine, many NGOs from other conflict zones like Northern Ireland and Colombia, calling for civil society peace building to be a central fulcrum for how the international community thinks about diplomacy in this region, and that can really accelerate the work that we've been speaking about, embedded at the center of a diplomatic process, and create that trust, those ideas, those leaders that can open up political space and from the bottom up generate the kind of space that we know diplomats need in order to conclude a final status agreement. So we're asking Germany to really lead on this as a civil society superpower in a way. Germany is one of the biggest funders and supporters of civil society. Foreign Minister Baerbock has been to the region, I think, 8 times since the war. We know in Germany and France the way in which civil society was critical for ending war on our continent. And at the G7, we can really set a legacy where civil society is finally and permanently placed at the center of how we look at diplomacy for Israelis and Palestinians.
That was John Linden, the Executive Director of the Alliance of Middle East Peace. Many thanks indeed for your time.
Thank you.